Welcome to The Roadmap. We are your hosts, Gogo.
I'm Coach.
And we're here to have real conversations with people whose successes you may know, but whose stories you probably don't.
We're connecting with the mentor, the founder, the artist, and the builder to uncover the personal journeys that they have taken.
No business roadmaps, no project roadmaps. This is the roadmap of your life, and we're here to explore it with you. Hey everyone, welcome to our very first filmed episode of the Roadmap podcast with your hosts here. I'm Gogo, Coach aka Steve, and our very first filmed guest, Ivan, who manages the project Mindfolk. We're so honored to have him. He's going to tell us so much we don't know about him yet, about his story in life. And we're so honored to have him. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us today. How are you guys doing, Coach? Ivan?
I mean, Ivan, you're the guest. I mean, how are you, man?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you guys having me on the show. This is your first show, my first actual video docs. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yo, I mean, this is the first docs. Whoa, okay, that makes it even cooler because again, we were talking before we got started, and I mean, I was like completely and totally buzzing. The energy's amazing, and this is great, and like to hear that and understand that like you trust us enough with your story to come out and show your face and do this, like that's huge. So I mean, man, thank you so much.
Yeah, man. It's like I said, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm obviously a bit nervous to tell the story, but I think this is something that it fits in so nicely with what Mindfolk represents, and I think a bit of history about the team will just add a new level of trust with the community and with the ecosystem as a whole.
Ivan, I'd love to ask, kind of where you're at and everything. But before we get into that, Gogo, I wanted to know if you wanted to kind of share with our listeners, since this is the first episode, kind of what what the whole point of the roadmap is and why we're doing this and why, we're grateful that Ivan's here.
Absolutely. So we've had one audio space so far where we were able to express the message here, but this is our very first filmed episode, and this kind of represents even more explicitly what we're trying to do here, which is to tell the true human stories that what we don't really get to hear that often in a Web3 space. So we really want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to um, be excited about both Web 2 and Web 3 experiences and reach both a Web 2 and Web 3 audience. We want to capture that human element. It's less about let's talk to projects and what they're doing, and let's talk about crypto and what the newest TA is for that day or that week or this month. It's more about what brought you here as an individual. How did you get to where you are today? What drives you, and weave that into what you're doing here in the space. And we also want to talk to people who are outside of Web3 and how they have managed to bring themselves up to the individual that they are, the journeys that they've had, their roadmap as an individual, as a human. And so that's why we've called this show, ironically, the roadmap. So it's less about roadmaps for projects and roadmaps that you've taken in life. And that's what we're here to do today with Ivan.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're excited. We really are. And Ivan, again, since we've kind of laid a little bit of groundwork, I want to kind of kick it over to you. And you mentioned you were with the Mindfolk team and everything, but like as Gogo mentioned, we want to focus on Ivan the person, and then we'll figure out how Mindfolk is weaved in and kind of your journey. So, like, where better to start than I guess right now? Like, where in the world is Ivan? Because again, Web3 is a global entity, right? We're all over the globe. Where are you at, and what's going on right now?
Yeah, so at this very point in time, I'm in the United Arab Emirates. I've been living here for about 2 years, but I was born in South Africa. I grew up in South Africa. Um, just when you said the roadmap of the human being, the first thing I thought is I was like, wow, that's such an like a much easier roadmap to talk about than a roadmap of a project. It's this is my life. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing that. Yeah, like I said, I grew up in South Africa. I was born in Johannesburg. I went to boarding school in Pretoria. Worked in Pretoria for a while. Moved back to Johannesburg, and then yeah, after that, ended up moving to the UAE 2 years ago.
I mean, I love how you just got like, you're like, oh, I did this, and then they just kind of blew by it. And again, I'm curious, like you said boarding school, like for this in the States isn't something that I'm overly familiar with. Gogo, are you familiar with like boarding school or
No,
anything is in that nature?
there are a few, and I think they're usually in the like northeast coast, and like maybe like Midwest, in the north,
Mhm.
but it's usually very seldom that you hear about boarding school in the U.S.
Yeah, it's pretty almost military nature. Go ahead, like, can you share about like what it was like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So boarding school is basically just, you live on a specific campus during the week, and then we would spend weekends at home. So it wasn't like a full-time board. In South Africa, you get schools that are like an entire term is when, that you spend the entire term living and sleeping on your campus at your school. Uh, Ours was quite a unique case. When I was in primary school, I got pretty heavy into swimming. So by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, I was, I guess you guys would call it swimming on state level. In South Africa, it's called provincial level. And from there, like my swimming just became like everything in my life. So I was lucky enough. I didn't grow up in a necessarily wealthy family. Like we weren't poor, but we were like middle class, I guess. So I wasn't really in a position to go to private schools or expensive schools. But because of my swimming, I could afford to go to those schools from through scholarships and bursaries, etc. So when I was 14, I just started high school, and my swimming was going really well. And I was approached by the High Performance Center, which is in Pretoria. And basically, the head of the High Performance Center said, "Cool, we want you to come and train at the National Training Center." And yeah, then I moved to Pretoria, and that's when my boarding school time started. And what that looked like was living on a campus with only athletes. So we had an entire floor of a building, which was just like rooms back to back, parallel, of just swimmers. So swimmers from all over the country that were there just to train for swimming. Like we train twice a day, 5 a.m. in the morning for 2 hours, and then we'd get back from school, and then we train from 3 to 5, and then we'd gym from 5 to 6, and then we'd have our dinner, and then probably like have like physiotherapy or like psychology, or so the entire place was built just for high performing athletes. So yeah, that was a crazy experience. When I look back on those times, I always look on them fondly, because that's when I learned a lot of discipline. I made some amazing friends. I always mention this in spaces, but Sigmundo, one of the other team members of Mindfolk, was my roommate, and he was also a really good swimmer in his time. So that's where me and him met each other, through the swimming, and we were roommates. And he's basically been one of my closest friends from then, from like maybe 12, 13 years old. So yeah, that was a really great experience. A lot of good things happened in my life during that time.
That's so rare to know someone in Web3 that you've known since you were in middle school at that age. That's really uncommon. So you've been good friends for that long time. I mean, probably wow. So would you say that swimming as a sport was something that you were passionate about because you were good at it, or passionate about regardless of your skill level?
So I was definitely passionate about swimming, and obviously, the better I got at it, the stronger my passion grew for it. And also, by the way, like our entire team for Mindfolk, I've been friends with them all since middle school. Like the entire team, I met every single team member
Oh,
probably when I was between the age of 12 and 15, and we've worked on businesses together. We've known each other. Some of them were part of my post high school. Sigmundo himself, I didn't really know so much after school, but we'll get into that. But yeah, my passion for swimming grew with how I improved in swimming. And it was weird because when I was younger, like in the primary school days, before I was at the high performance center, I was a big fish in a small pond. So I was swimming in a squad where I was the best swimmer in the squad and I was doing really well. And I guess that's why I was approached, and I was like one of the best in my province or state. And when they took me to the national training center, I was a tiny fish. And we had Olympic athletes. We had, I was just like, I was just another dude, I was like, I was okay. We like just in my age group alone, we had like the top four in my age group in the country. So I was competing and I was training with the same people I was competing with and living with them. So that was amazing. I mean, I can't say that was a bad thing. It was, we all pushed each other, and it was everybody wanted to bring a new level, and everyone's goal was the Olympics. Like there was no doubts about that. And I guess during my time at the high performance center, it was probably when I was about 16 or 17. No, when I was 17, just about to finish high school, a year and a half out. And it was also a year and a half out from Olympic trials. And my coach is actually an American. Never forget him. He was like a Navy SEAL. He swam for Arizona State. He went to Olympics. So he was
Oh,
just
no
like,
way.
yeah, pretty crazy. And he was super hardcore. And he basically took me aside when I was like 17, and he was just like, you need to make a decision now. Like, do you want to go to Olympics, or do you want to go and get a good degree? Because you're not gonna. Unfortunately, most of the time you won't get both. Because if you want to go to Olympics, I'd probably recommend you go to a university in America and you get a scholarship, and then they're gonna basically
Hmm.
dictate what you study. You're not gonna just be able to study whatever you want. And I was reasonably good at school. I was never like bad at school. I was one of those, like, I guess the teachers were always like, you could do so much better if you actually weren't sleeping in class all day because you were tired from training. And then yeah, I did these aptitude tests and all these like psychographic analysis, whatever, and they told me, they were like, yeah, you should become an engineer or an architect. And then I think the third was like it was marketing. But at that time, I think I was probably doing reasonably okay in maths, and at the school I was at, because even though we were in boarding school, it was more that we were living in the sports facility. But we went to school, myself and Sigmundo, which was off campus, and it was a pretty good private school. And I had this math teacher who like approached me when I was also around that same time. I was 16 or 17, and she was like, "Right now, you're getting whatever 60s in math." She's like, "You could easily finish with a distinction in your final year if you just come after school twice a week and just like pay a bit of attention, and you could do really well, because like you obviously have like a knack for the like mathematical side of your brain is analytical or whatever." So I did that, and I ended up getting the distinction in maths and did science. And so I kind of chose, I guess on a subconscious level, I chose the path of wanting to get a good degree, but the I guess this on the surface level, I was like, I want to go to Olympics. But I think by that time I'd realized, I was like, yo, like this Olympic dream, at when I was 17, 18, I was probably, top 5 in the country, but like I was still quite a way off Olympics. So even though I did qualify for Olympic trials, I didn't end up going to Olympic trials. I ended up moving back to Johannesburg to start my degree in engineering, which was a massive change. I remember that was it was a quite a unique experience for me, because I'd moved back to a city where I didn't really have friends. I didn't really. I had friends from like many years before that, but most of my friends were living in Pretoria at the time. So yeah, I started my engineering degree. Um, I also had dated the same girl throughout my high school, and she had lived in Pretoria, and just before I'd moved back to Johannesburg, obviously being this like new to university and new experiences, I was like, we broke up. And yeah, that kind of ended up backfiring on me, because all I wanted to do was get back with her, and that kind of like just got in the middle of my studies, and it like I wasn't really training, and it like that period of time was kind of blurry actually. And yeah, I was only a year
What's
off.
before you
Yeah,
keep going real quick, Ivan, like what's interesting, what I hear, like you go from the boarding school side of things to where everything's structured and you've got Olympic dreams and you've got all this stuff. And then it's like, okay, hey, I'm gonna pivot I'm going to go back home and I'm going to go into an environment to where there's less structure, there's less like all of this stuff. And like you mentioned, you had the girlfriend, you had all this stuff. Like, I guess, how did you come to that decision, and how did you like, and what the second question is like, was it easy for you to walk away from something that you had devoted such amount of time in your life to?
Yeah, it's weird when I think back on it. Like I said, it's kind of blurry, but I remember there were specific things that happened during that time. The first thing was that this is so like so superficial and such surface level nonsense. But there was one thing I remember was that I was getting towards the end of my matric year, and I'd swam the best time of my life for the event that I raced 100 freestyle. And I remember it was a big moment for me, and it kind of like brought me back into the swimming. But I was still like, okay, I'll still go back to Johannesburg, kind of as like maybe a gap year. Maybe I still get into the swimming, see how it goes. Olympic trials had happened by then, so it was only going to be 4 years later if I was going to pursue that. And there was something so like I remember my folks basically said to me, they were like, cool, you can stay in Pretoria and you can keep swimming and studying in Pretoria, but then you're not going to get a car. So it's like we can't afford that. If we have to pay like
It's the dangling of the keys.
exactly. And I mean, it's like looking back, it's so lame, but I'm so glad I went through that at that point in my life, because I went back to Johannesburg to live at home. I got the car, and 6 months later, the car was stolen. So it was almost like this. Yeah, I know it's crazy, and it was a super nice car as well. Well, not super nice. I mean, by my standard of living, it was cool for a guy of my age. Um, but for
What
real
was it?
got this car. It was a VW Polo.
Oh, you got the
Yeah, so it had like yeah,
All right. I don't I'm trying to picture it. I'm gonna have to look it up. Well, maybe we'll link one
yeah,
in the
yeah.
show
I can even
notes.
send you a photo of the original. So,
I mean, they got him a I mean, that's nice. Well, his parents got him a Volkswagen. Like, wow. So so you went through that because you wanted that sense of independence, have the car, get around. You don't have to rely on anybody else to drive you or public transport. And then that kind of fell through. Um, you you went to, like Coach mentioned, pivot, where you were used to having a sense of structure, but in my experience, I don't know if it's the same for you, you kind of assume that you can put that structure in your life for yourself because you were like, you know, used to the assembly line of that. You feel you can use that template for yourself. But if someone's not assembling that structure for you, it's so hard. It's so hard to do it for yourself, especially when you're transitioning from like teen life to actual adulthood. There are so many transitions going on at the same time. So I can imagine how difficult that was. Like trying to impose rules and discipline for yourself, even though you spent several years acquiring skills in discipline. When you're on your own and you have no one there to do those checks and balances for you, while maybe several of your other friends went in different directions doing that for themselves, or maybe going on to the Olympic trials. Was that, were you feeling kind of, I don't know, isolated, trying to make those rules for yourself and then kind of balancing, you know, school and then a regretted decision in your love life, all of that stuff? Like, was anyone there to be a sounding board to help you?
so I was fortunate in the way that I had a few friends through swimming that still lived in Johannesburg that I'd reconnected with during that time. But what you said now was, I guess this feels like a therapy session, because that's some serious truth there. Uh, I guess that's the way I felt. I wanted this independence and I wanted this freedom, but I actually didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea what it was like to now, have this. I could be anywhere I wanted. I could do the things that I wanted to do, and that didn't necessarily mean I was going to do the right things. But yeah, that whole experience was. I remember like really connecting with a few people during that year, but the key or the most notable thing that happened that year was that I really just wanted to move back to Pretoria and get back with my ex. And basically I was willing to do whatever it took for that. And that obviously didn't work out for me because, you know, she'd moved on and like life moves on and things change. And um, my car was stolen, and that was actually an amazing life lesson because I never forget the day it was stolen, and it was so devastating for me. But obviously it was insured, so it wasn't the end of the world. But it was like this flip, or the switch that flipped in my mind where like materialism just dissolved. Like it was like a life lesson I needed to learn because I went from wanting those kinds of things to just being like, okay, let's get like the cheapest option imaginable and just live like as lean as possible, you know, and focus my energy on other things. And it was, I just never cared again about, I mean, even now, like I drive a Toyota Corolla, like, and I love it. Like it's like the most gangster car in the Middle East, you know, it's just like this super reliable, you know, I've never had a thing for having like a fancy car or having like, you know, I moved away from that material sort of way of thinking and like way of living. So yeah, those were good lessons, but the independence part was definitely challenging for me. Obviously, it led to me dropping out of engineering. So I'd finished my first year at the University of Johannesburg, and when I'd finished that year, I didn't get back with my ex, obviously, and I had gone through that experience with my car, and I basically said to my folks, "Cool, I want to go back to Pretoria. I want to go study at the University of Pretoria. I want to go, possibly like live with some old friends. You know, get into like we call it like a digs. I don't know what it's called in the United States. I guess like a not a fraternity, but like a go stay with like a group of old friends of mine and study there." And so I did that, and my first year back in Pretoria, I studied engineering, continued into the second year of engineering, and while I was there, I met this dude who was like a graffiti artist, and he was just like this like super cool dude. He like wore like these massive beads, and he was just like this like really artistic guy. I mean, by the time he was like 18, he was in the newspapers for being this crazy graffiti artist, and he ended up living with us. You know, we lived in the same house together, and I just like I really dug this dude. And I'd always been into drawing, and I did art at school as well, but I never imagined that I would pursue something like that after school. And so during that second year and being in Pretoria and doing the second year of engineering, I just kind of like decided mid-year, I was like, cool, no, this is it. Like, I'm done with engineering. I'm going to go and study design with this guy because that's what he was doing. And he was like, "Yo, man, you should like come and study this as well." And he taught me how to do graffiti. And we were like we would sit every day after school and like have like sketch sessions. And I used to love it. We used to like get back and like I used to smoke a lot of weed as well at that time. I started after school, and it was also weird. Like up until I finished school, because of the swimming, like I'd never been like a teenage drinker or smoker, or we didn't do those things because of like we were swimmers. So when I left school, I was like,
Aim for that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So when I left school, I was like, cool, we're gonna do all of this shit now. Like we're gonna, we're gonna try this stuff. Um, and we used to smoke a lot. This guy, this friend of
Wow.
mine, he smoked every day. So we get home from university and we'd draw all day at university and design. Then we'd get home and we'd like sit in the garden and draw like the plants and just like smoke weed and listen to Bob Marley and Kings of Leon. And it was so vibey. Like it was a lot of fun. Um, so I was glad I made that decision to transition into information design. And then, yeah, then I guess we can get into like the next phase. Have you guys got any questions about that so far?
Gogo, do you have anything?
No, no, I mean, this is a wonderful piece of your history. I love that you listen to not only Bob Marley but Kings of Leon. I'm imagining myself in that same set of like 2 or 3 years where I listened to a lot of Kings of Leon and I was really pretentious and stupid. So I still hear those like first few singles from Kings of Leon and I'm like driving in my car and I'm like, yeah. So yeah, keep going. What about you,
Yeah, I mean,
Coach?
it's interesting because like what I sit and I reflect on is it, a lot of people get put in this situation, right, to where you're called and pulled. You feel pulled to do something different than you're actually doing, right? So like I think about when you're in university, And I went through it. When I went to school. I originally went to school for pharmacy. Can you imagine Coach the pharmacist? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just,
Hectic, yeah.
and I know,
Oh,
right? Like, I'm just,
I love
it's
that.
crazy.
So listen, when I went to school, I had a double major for 3 years in so they had regular um, you know, honors for liberal arts, and then there was a tier above that, and I was in the one above that, and then I also had um, uh, my second major was business honors, and I stuck with that business honors double major for 3 years, even though it was sucking the soul right out of me. I'd be in that building every day, and everyone was walking around in their little suits with their little briefcases going from class to class. And I was in my finance classes and my accounting classes. And even though even though I was good at it, I hated it. I hated it. So I mean, I had like 1 year of credits left, and I dropped it. So like, yeah, we all have weird pasts. But yeah, the pharmacist, interesting. Um, I don't know. I interesting. And I ended up defending my honors thesis in poetry, and me, who had 3 years of business honors in her. No, I did the one thing you can't make a living at, right? That's what I. But it's okay. So I can relate to all of this, like going in and out of weird school decisions and like dropping it for a while and coming back. Yeah. Also Kings of Leon. But I will say I will give credit to Kings of Leon for getting me like back into my poetry mode, because like listening to those songs, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll write a poem about this weird song. And then I took that into my poetry class, and it did really well.
So the red thread right now that I'm got is Kings of Leon. I've got it. This is great. So, uh, Ivan, so like again, here's this pivot moment for you, and you're like, okay, I'm sitting in the garden, I'm smoking weed, I'm drawing, and like, where does the journey go from there? Because again, like you can't make a living off of sitting in the garden, smoking weed, and drawing.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to mention AK, what's it, AKA Shake Night, or that album from Kings of Leon. Even to this day, like my wife always like she gets like upset with me because I'll listen to it like on repeat because it gives me this like goosebump nostalgia of those days. Like those days were great, you know, as much as we were just like sitting around smoking weed, I love that it was like we had this group of friends who were all just so passionate about like creativity and music, and I'd entered into this like new world of like exploration and like started learning these life lessons. And so it was honestly a really good phase. And so during that time we were going to these parties, and it was a house party in the CBD of like the central of Pretoria, close to the university. And it was literally like a like just like us, like a bunch of dudes who were living together in a house. It was a family house of theirs that they were staying in as like a digs, and they started throwing these parties, and they used to call it hotbox. And people like it was very alternative. It was like electronic music and like kind of weird parties, and like these bands, and like that used to be like raucous like this. We used to go there and like graffiti inside their house on their walls, and like people were getting naked, and it was just like people on the roofs. I mean, it's got crazy photos from those days. And so one of the main guys who lived in that house, like I kind of connected with him because I was just like, this is the coolest shit in the world. Like I need to get involved. Like I love this music. I love the scene. I love everything about this. It was still small, you know, like a few hundred people. And so I started like handing out flyers for him at university, you know, and then we'd do like graffiti pieces on the campus, on like these walls that you're allowed to paint for the events, you know, to try and promote them. And then I started doing like social media and like all sorts of things. And that's kind of how I started getting into events. And from there, everything that was like kind of like a runaway train. Like they grew substantially, and then we got to the point where I started doing my own events with the guys that I lived in a house with, separate to the guys that I was working for. But they were kind of complementary. You know, we were both trying to promote the same music, the same scene, the same vibe. It was like we all loved the same thing. We all had the same passion, and so we started doing these events. And when we were doing these events, like they first started like really small, but then they just grew. Like we went from, I think our first event we had like 300-400 people, and within about a year, I was still studying information design. I was like basically finishing my second year at this stage. By that time, I'd actually partnered with the guys that I'd originally, the guys that owned the Hotbox. One of them, he joined me to partner with my event company that I had started, and then another guy from a third party events company also joined us. So we kind of took like three different events companies and joined it into one and made like one powerhouse. And we wanted to do like really big events. Um, and so yeah, within a year of us coming together, we were running like a monthly event where we were getting like 1,500 2,000 people at our events for like alternative music, like very like niche. Back then it was like dubstep and drum and bass and like electronic musicians, like the South African artists that were just making like crazy, weird, experimental stuff, and it was really cool because it felt like we were so passionate about this, and we were able to like cultivate this massive audience of people who came to our events. Mostly, I think, because they were just university students who wanted to party, but it was like fucking awesome that they wanted to party at our parties, and like listen to our music because like we were so passionate about that, and so that was a really cool time. That whole journey of like getting into information design, getting back into drawing and graffiti and art, and then getting into music. Like I love that. I feel like I've always been surrounded by creatives, and it's always what I've enjoyed. Uh, but yeah, that unfortunately, I did end up dropping out of university again for a second time. This time, I was like, these events are going so well, and we there's no ways we're gonna be successful. There's no ways we're gonna fail. Like we're gonna make it, and we're gonna carry on doing this. I mean, we were making good money, like for an events company in general, let alone like a niche kind of music events company. And I was pretty sure certain that this is like what I was going to do, and it wasn't. I still don't think there was a bad way to think at the time because my two other business partners, that's still what they do, and they do it exceptionally successfully in South Africa. So, and I'm still friends with them. So I dropped out of university, went into these events full time, and then it was probably about, I would say, maybe 2 years into like really doing events consecutively. I was obviously drinking a lot at the events, and then I started experimenting with substance beyond weed. Like weed was like my first, and then I tried psychedelics. That was obviously like insane. I still have very fond memories of that, and from there I got into like more heavier stuff, stuff that kept me awake at the party, and I was drinking a lot at that time, and it almost felt like my focus had shifted from this like passion for music and creativity to like I want to party and like get fucked up, like that became like the priority, and I was doing that regularly because I was DJing at other people's parties and traveling around the country, and then I was throwing my own parties and DJing, and then just basically partying with like DJs that we were bringing from around the world to come and stay at DJ at our parties. So it was cool in a lot of ways because I got to meet some of my heroes at that stage in my life. Like I feel like I definitely ticked off some life goals through like some of the the artists that I'd brought, because it went from like local artists, small parties, to like literally like this is my favorite producer in the world, and like within 3 months having him fly to the country and doing like a national tour with him. It's just like surreal. But like I said, I did get carried away with the party side of it. That was a that was basically the beginning of a very destructive period in my life. I don't know if you guys got any questions so far.
So, yeah, yeah, Ivan, thank you for starting us off into that period of your life when you felt like it was necessary to um, drop out of your degree at that point. Was it mostly because you wanted to um, do these event, do these event jobs more full time and make more money? Or did you feel like information design wasn't really useful to you anymore, like it wouldn't pay off later to have that study background and that degree, in your pocket? Was it a combination of both? Did you feel like you were wasting time in class? What was that decision like for you? And then I'm sure Coach and I have a couple other questions too.
So, full transparency, it definitely wasn't that I thought it was the wrong thing to study. I loved it. If I look back now, I would say, I don't want to say I regret anything, but I definitely should have finished information design. It's an amazing degree. Someone else on our team at Mindfolk, he studied with me at information design. He's our designer. He does all our work. He does our animations. I'm sure you guys have seen some of that stuff. It's amazing. He's incredible. And I studied with him. I dropped out. He didn't. The skills I learned, even just in the 2 years that I was there, were great. But the real reason I dropped out, I guess the reason I tell myself to make myself feel better is because I wanted to make more money with events. But I think the real truth is, during my second year, I remember getting towards the third quarter of the year. And by the end of the year, you have to hand in like a final year portfolio for illustration and a final year portfolio for design. And that's basically like a accumulation of all the work that you've done throughout the year. And I'd missed these random things here and there from like obviously not being in class or just, because information design is not like other degrees, like you're on campus at random times for an hour or 2 hours. Information design was like you have 5 hours of illustration in the morning and then you have 5 hours of design in the morning. So it was a very like almost school like timetable. You were on campus all the time because there was just so much practice involved. And I would miss a lot of that. And so by the time it got to like putting my portfolio together, it's so crazy. I was looking through Facebook DMs. I couldn't sleep the other night. I was just like, let me see who like I spoke to 5 years ago, and just like randomly scrolling through. And someone I'd spoken to was a friend of mine that I was very close with at that time. And one of the messages was like, it was in that exact time frame. And I never forget, she asked me, she was like, do you feel like you're too far behind to catch up? And my response to her was, I do think I can do it, but I don't know if I have it in me to get it all done. Like I'm just like, I'm so in this event space and I don't know if I'm gonna do this, And I remember it was pretty sad because it kind of just fizzled out. It was like I just kind of got closer towards the end of the year and eventually there just wasn't enough time. And I just passed that point where it was like, I just was like, yo, mom, like I'm dropping out of university, I'm gonna do my own thing with events. So yeah, it wasn't that it was the wrong thing to study. It was definitely just more that where I was in my life didn't align, and there's obviously reasons for that beyond like my understanding. But yeah, that's how it went down.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Sometimes the timing is right. I feel like the same. Sorry,
Oh,
Coach.
go.
But I just want to agree. Like, for me, um, the timing to finish school and be fully focused, like, I regretted for quite some time that I didn't finish right when everybody else finished, but I think it came down to not only did I have important reasons with my family and with what was going on in my own life, but also like there was one particular course in my honors degree that was like a rite of passage for everybody, and it was terrifying. It was like a full like physics degree crammed into one semester, um, and I I I took it and dropped it twice within the first week when I was there when I was like really young. And then when I came back and finished it later, I felt actually more fully equipped to take it and finish it and more focused. And sometimes it's just not the right time in your life. Like you're focused on other things. So um, it's not necessarily, the case that, like with you in information design, um, there could be another time in your life with that or with anything else that you picked up and dropped, and um, you might you know study it some more later. It just wasn't the right time in your life because you were really passionate about what you were doing at that time, and that needed your full attention. So I completely relate to that. Go ahead,
Oh,
Coach.
you're
I'm
totally
sorry.
good.
There's a little bit of
Yeah, and again, obviously, as we mentioned early on, this is our first episode, and we're working through this, and we're continuing to figure out how we're going to navigate this stuff. So we appreciate the patience. Like, here's the interesting thing. Here's a fun fact I'll give you, Ivan, and then I'm going to kind of I'll transition us off of where you were just at. But like, fun fact: in college, I used to DJ. I used to help my buddies run a DJ company. We DJ'd at the largest clubs in Toledo, Ohio. Yes, and we like. But again, I understand and relate to what you were talking about creating a vibe and creating, and it ties to actually what I do, like what I've done my whole life, right? Creating this environment to where people feel welcome, to something that people want to be a part of, and they feel called to be a part of because it's something special, right? It makes them feel a certain way. And right, obviously, when you add alcohol, drugs, things like that makes people feel a certain way. But I'm talking about like the vibe and the environment that you created, right? Because again, that's especially in college. You think about people in college, they're searching for so many things, much like you were, right? Like we're searching, we're trying to figure this out. And at some point in time, here's my transition. What we're chasing changes, and what we decide we want to chase changes. And that's kind of what I hear from you. But the one thing I keep holding on to is that I heard was like, again, the drugs, the alcohol, and that kind of stuff. And I'm curious to see how that affected everything. And then like the transition forward, because you had a good thing going. And then before we started talking, and then I felt as though we were kind of going to take a different pivot on the roadmap for your life. And I'm curious where that goes next.
So yeah, I would say this is I guess the crux of the roadmap. For me, it was the bottleneck in my life up to this point. So it got to the point where, like I said, I'd gotten way too involved in, the drugs and partying side of events, as opposed to like actually wanting to, like that original. I never forget, there was like specific moments that I had where I would have conversations with friends and I would be like, man, like this is not, like I'm not doing this because I love to do this anymore. Like I'm just doing this to get fucked up. Like it's like it was obvious to me that that was the case, and it's like I couldn't move away from it. It was too. It was one of those things where there were our group of friends that were all partying together in that way, like getting fucked up. We'd always say to each other, yeah, like no, like next weekend, like or next week we're gonna change it. We're gonna change it, and it's just like no one really meant it, not in a deep and meaningful way. And it was actually one of my business partners who he just said to me, he was like, no, man, he's, similar to in high school. He just like took me aside and he was like, dude, like you could do anything you want. Like, I believe in you. Like I still, to this day, every time I'm in South Africa, I visit him and we have some beers and we talk about it. And he's got kids and, I love him to death. And he just like took me aside and he was like, you need to figure this shit out. He's like, this is not for you. Like, you can't handle this. Like, I'm telling you now, like, I'm going to tell your folks and like, we're going to sort this out kind of thing, And like, that's kind of how it went down. Like, eventually, he told my mom, and me and her like had a massive, I still remember I didn't even tell her that I dropped out until it was like months afterwards. I just like randomly just like, oh, I'm not studying anymore. And so that ended up happening. But I genuinely wanted to change at that point. Like I like deeply wanted to change. Like I knew that I was in the wrong place, and I knew, and this isn't even something that I hold against people who are in that space. Like I know guys, like I said, that are still doing events, that are doing, drugs and drinking and whatever, and they live like that. Who am I to say, someone's got to live that life, and like, who am I to say that they can't be successful in their own way living like that? Because I've met a lot of great people who can productively live in that kind of environment, and it just wasn't for me personally. Like I wasn't one of those people. I couldn't do that. I needed to do something else in my life, and it was pretty obvious to me at that time. And so I moved back home. I had barely any money, but obviously like had spent most of it on stupid shit like partying and like going out and doing whatever. And I moved back home in with my folks, and basically my parents were like, here's the ultimatum. Like you got one last chance, like we'll send you back to university if you can get in, and you can finish your undergrad in whatever you want, whatever you can get in for. And that's it. And if you don't, and if you fail a single subject during your entire studies, like that's it, you're done. Like you need to go get a job and carry on with your life. So that was a pretty important moment. And I immediately like started taking my life really seriously. I went back to my very first swimming coach that I started with when I was 10. It just so happened to be when I was partying. It was so crazy because he's also like, he's quite a psychedelic dude, and he was like SA champ swimmer, but he's a very chill out guy. And I'd seen him at a few of these festivals that I like DJ'd at. Like he'd be there, like there, he's got kids and stuff, but he'd be there at the back, like the older guy, like just hanging out. And I went to him, and I remember like going to him at a party and being like, oh, like I dream about swimming. Like I need to like, and he said to me, he's like, where are you now? And I'm like, no, I'm actually moving back home. And he was like, well, I'm like literally 2 kilometers away from your home. He's like, come to the pool, come swim again. He's like, I've opened an invitation. You don't have to pay, just come and swim. I got a whole squad, like just to get back in shape. And I was like, okay, because I'd picked up a lot of weight, and I was just like, I was all around in just a bad place. Um, so I went back to him, started swimming with a bunch of like 18, 19 year olds. I was like, like it was very challenging, but it was really cool. And got back into university by literally like back and forth emails with like head of departments, just basically like begging, saying like, this is it, like, please give me this opportunity. And got back into my undergrad, started swimming again. And basically it felt like I just closed that chapter on my life. I kept in touch with a handful of people from those events days. I obviously had my original homies from like high school, like some of the the Mindfolk team and people, but for the most part, like that whole space, like I never kept in touch. It was just like it just dissolved. It was like I'd moved on to something else, and I was like in this absolute focus. Like I wanted to like like I remember like I was on this mission of like reading a book every week. So I'd read like 50 books a year, and I'd be like studying, and I'd be swimming, and I'd basically never went out unless it was, I was really very serious about picking myself up. And I think the biggest motivation for me for that was that I'd see all my friends who were now engineers or doctors, or they were like, excelling in whatever aspect of their life. And like, now here I am living at home. And all I could remember was like, I need to basically take like 5 years of maybe messing around and compress those and spend like the next 3 years playing catch up, you know. And that was motivating for me at the time. But I have since learned that it's never too late to start again, and we can get to that as well if you guys want to ask some questions.
I have a question for you. So when you were exacting this extreme focus after your parents kind of gave you this ultimatum, was that ultimatum enough for you to just motivate yourself? Because you were moving incredibly at this really like high performance pace, and you involved your past swim coach from when you were much younger, and he was a great resource for you. But did you have other resources at your disposal to be sounding boards, or were you really piloting this plane for yourself? Who helped you stay focused? Or I mean, that's my curiosity at this point, because you were doing so well. Did you manage that all on your own, or did people keep you in balance?
So I think that's a great question. I can't. There were different people that played different roles, but for the most part, I mean, so for example, Sigmundo, one of the Mindfolk teammates, he when I was making this transition, I'd moved back home. He contacted me and he was like, "Listen," he'd been a nomadic entrepreneur for many years, and he kind of contacted me and he was like, "Listen, he has this course. I think you should do it and just do exactly what this guy says and build your own business. Like you've got nothing to lose. Like here's the free resources." So there were people that played specific roles. I feel like a lot of it was like being at home as well. Like myself and my mom was super close. She's always one of the best for me, and she was definitely a massive influence on me. Because she was always, she knew. I mean, something between me and my mom that I guess a lot of people might not have. Like I told her everything, like everything. Like I didn't hold anything back. Like she knew exactly what I'd done. At university, she knew all about substance. She knew about the drinking. She knew about all the shit things I had done to lead up to that point, because I just wanted to have that open relationship with her. And it was hard for her as well, like no parent wants to hear that. But getting back into swimming, I guess I had like my coach kind of acted as that, because every day I would be there on pool deck, and me and him would chat a lot. And he obviously knew about my background as well. And then at home, I was, uh, I had like a separate little cottage where I was working, but I was living with my mom, and she was very like involved in my life. And then I had a few friends like Sigmundo and a few other friends who, even Carl, another guy in the Mindfolk team, who were very close to me, that would, we'd talk a lot. But that time frame, when I look back at who I was just before that, and the amount of, or the headspace I was in compared to the years that it took to get out of it, it's actually pretty crazy. I mean, I was at one stage having like panic attacks. Like I was going into exams and I just like I couldn't write, and I was a mess. I started training again, and I was going through like injury after injury, because I was either training too hard, or I just wasn't, I hadn't adapted because of all the years that I hadn't spent training. So it was like, as I'm like making progress, like I'd get hit down and like hit down and hit down. But something about me that I learned from high school years and university, with all these like psychographic tests and personality analysis, is that like I have a very relentless and like obsessive nature. So like if I want to get something, like there's a good chance I'm going to do anything to get there, like to a fault sometimes. So I was like on this mission, and I guess another big source of guidance was that I was reading like crazy. Like I was like every book on how to stay motivated, mental wellness, like starting up businesses. Like I just I read a lot of meditation, like started going on meditation retreats, which was like, that's a whole nother story. Like, and just basically like facing my past, and trying to develop new habits and new skills, and just rewire my brain to be efficient and to start moving in a specific direction. And I think the biggest motivator, like I said, was that feeling of like this is the last chance I have. Like I've always felt inside like I wanted to do great things with my life. I don't know. I guess everyone has that in some way, but I was like, this is it. I was like 26 years old, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is your chance. Like, you either make it happen now, or like you're really gonna regret this in the future. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
What's interesting for me is sitting you hear that one of the other catalysts, like I love hearing like you move home and it's the last straw. But what I picked up from what all you said there was you were close with your mom, and like, and again, I was very close with my mom. She passed away many years ago, but like I understand that feeling of telling somebody that you respect, again, parent, everything. And then also when they come down and they're like, look, this is the last chance. Like, I believe in you. And to me, what I sit in here is it's almost like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, it's almost like you didn't want to disappoint your mom more than anything, or at least maybe I'm putting that, my experience on that, but that's kind of how I experienced what you just said.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's that was huge. I guess maybe I'm underplaying that aspect of it, but for sure. I mean, my mom is like, one of the most important people in my life. She always has been. When I was in high school, she was at every single gala. She literally never missed a single event of anything that I ever did. So, and even now, like we're super close, and I always think about how I want to like be able to give back to my parents. Like it's always been something. And the real big turning point was when I was doing those events, and when I was like drinking a lot. Like I didn't have the relationship that I wanted with my mom, because she was super upset. Obviously she wasn't happy, and it just like we had this separation. And even when I moved back home initially, it was very like, even though I was doing my best and doing the right things, there was a lot of conflict, because my mind was just not in a place to like fully appreciate and like be grateful for the opportunities that she'd given me my whole life. And the way that became super apparent was, again, Sigmundo, he messaged me and he was like, dude, you need to go on one of these meditation retreats. So I didn't know anything about meditation. I didn't know anything about Vipassana, about retreats, nothing. He was just like, here's the link, plug it in, get a ticket, go to Cape Town, do the retreat. And I was like, okay, shit, we're going to do this. I didn't even think about it, which is good that I didn't, because maybe I wouldn't have gone if I knew more. But I flew to Cape Town by myself, literally had like got on a random like in like a carpool with a few other guys who were doing the retreat, drove 3 hours outside of Cape Town into this like beautiful area called Worcester, like in the mountains at the bottom, like next to like a lion park. It's like literally like ice on the top of the mountains, like most beautiful scenic places in the world. And get to this retreat, and basically the next day you start, and it's like 10 days silence. You can't talk, you can't make eye contact. You sit for like 10 hours a day, and it's just like anything you've ever done in your life, like you are going to face that shit, and it's going to be any feelings, any negativity, like it's going to be. And I just remember like getting to like day 4 and just being like, I need to get the fuck out of here, like I'm going to lose my mind. Like I was like, I just had this like the deepest pain. It was like someone like was stabbing me in the heart, and it just like all these things started coming up, like all this like deep regret, and like thinking so much about like all the people I love, and feeling like. And I still remember thinking on the retreat, like, am I going to feel like this for the rest of my life? Like if I come to this retreat to like implant this like depression that's going to like haunt me forever. I still, it was insane. And again, I guess because of my personality, I was just like, well, fuck it, I'm here. And I still remember like in the that you watch like these dissertations or whatever in the evenings, and he'd like explain certain aspects of the practice. And the one thing he kept saying was like, make the most of your time. Like you here now, like don't leave, because you kind of like take a vow in the beginning not to leave no matter what. And I still remember just like I would like walk out of a session and I'd just be like this close to just bursting into tears, just being like, I am like the like, the only way I can say it is like sad, like deeply sad and lonely. Just, and I guess it was just it was all that part of my history just being compressed into like this like thoughts. And so anyway, I pushed through, and I basically got to like day 7, and there was just like this moment. I never forget. It was like 6:30 in the evening. It was one of the evening sits, because you sit for like 2-3 hours and then you eat, and then you sit for 2-3 hours and then you have a break. But you basically meditate from 4:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, with like 2 hours of rest, and then there's like one meal in the morning and one meal at like 12, and that's it. You don't eat more than that, so you're like fasting, and it's just like it's really intense. And I get to day 7, and it's like an evening sit, and I just like I'm sitting, and I'm just like in pain, because you have to go through these specific group sessions where it's called aditan, which is like strong determination, where you have to sit without moving no matter how painful it is, so that you can realize that pain is just an expression of your mind. It's like it's just a signal that's being sent. There's nothing actually. It's just a sensation, just like a feeling of good, or a feeling of like tickle or scratch or itchy or whatever. And I never forget, like I had this pain in my ass, literally, like sitting, and I just like sitting cross-legged and thinking like I'm going, like sweating, like I'm gonna have to move, and just thinking like you can do this. And then just having this piercing moment where like my mind just like shot straight through the clouds, and that everything just like basically dissolved into like vibrations. And like my whole experience was like this shroom trip of subtle vibrations. And it felt like I was just this, like I wasn't anywhere, I was just everywhere. And I'd like had this breakthrough, and it was insane. And then the rest of the retreat was still challenging, but like I felt like I'd made progress, and I'm so glad that I went through that. I think some people call it like rising and passing is what the experience is called. And I never forget like the day that retreat ended, and I got my phone, I just like phoned my mom, and I was just like bawling. I was just like, it felt like I just needed to like tell her that everything she'd done in my entire life was just like I just needed to appreciate that, and like I to this day, like that's could never be reversed. It's like I feel like that's such a big part of my life. It's just like I just want to be able to like provide and just look after them. And I could never ever give her back what she gave me, like growing up as a kid. And like that's what I realized in the retreat. And it's like I could never reverse that. And I guess that's like probably one of the best moments in my life, is like when I really had that like deep appreciation for my family. And yeah, that was a like a life changing moment for sure.
Wow, that's incredible. I've I've often thought what it would be like to be able to actually go on one of those seclusion retreats. The fact that you were actually able to have that breakthrough moment and have a deep realization about self and love and gratitude. Gratitude, I think, is something that gets so overlooked in our lives because we're so caught up in our own moments of pain. And you had that physical, literal transitory moment. Um, and you and I have connected before on how everything in nature is transitory. Um, so I think that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that experience with us, Ivan.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Gogo said. Like I'm a meditator. I believe and practice gratitude and all that. But to hear those moments come from you, and again, I pay attention to a lot of people that have gone on those retreats, and it's very profound. And I think one of my bigger takeaways was right, like it was a forced environment to you to sit and be with yourself. And you mentioned like everything felt bottled up, right? And if I'm relating to things in life and society and all that right now, like I guarantee that I'm not the only one, you're not the only one, Gogo's not the only one that feels those moments. But it's hard to articulate or identify that. I'm a very big proponent of meditation, of therapy, of all of these things, because again, everything tying it back to the roadmap and our journey, right? Like everything we've gone through makes up who we are, but how we store it and where it sits within us and all that stuff, like it's unique to the individual. And there are moments to where we have those experiences to where it's freeing. For some it may be at church, if for others it may be sitting and meditating and doing these retreats. But like I encourage, a good therapy session, like, but I encourage anybody that not anybody that's dealing with anything, because we're all dealing with stuff, but like take moments with yourself and with guided with somebody else to kind of go on those explorations, because to hear that from you, that continues to give me hope and allows me to keep going forward as a husband, as a father, and as a human. Like I love hearing this stuff, and I love that you shared that piece. So like Ivan, thank you for that. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I haven't spoken to many people about that, beyond like my very close circles. But yeah, I mean, I still try and go on a retreat every year, just to catch up. I try and sit as much as possible. Like technically should be sitting 2 hours a day, but that becomes quite difficult in Web3. But yeah, that experience I could never be more thankful for that experience, just because it like brought me so much closer to everybody in my life. Like, I mean, it was just like, I just wanted to like phone everyone and just be like, I love you and I just appreciate you. And I could never like tell you that enough. And before that, I couldn't even get around to like, when I told my mom that I loved her, of course I did. She was my mother. But it wasn't like, when I told her after that, it was like, holy shit, like this is some really profound like gratitude, And yeah, I think that was an important moment in my life. That was about, I think I was finishing my final year of undergrad at that point, and my undergrad had gone exceptionally well. I think because of the swimming and just like my discipline, like I ended up doing really well in my undergrad. I got into an honors program. I did really well in my honors program. I finished number one in my year at like the best marketing school in Africa. So I was super proud of myself. Went on to complete my master's. So yeah, I mean, all of it kind of started like in those fundamental years of the transition from moving back into home and going through like struggle after struggle, and like really just like putting the time in to rebuild myself and to get to know myself and to really find like what I wanted to do. And it's funny, I always speak to my wife about this, but it's like I don't even necessarily think that there is something specific for everyone. I think like you start doing things and like you figure out what you're good at and you learn to enjoy it, and the motivation comes after that. You're not just going to wake up one day and be like, I'm going to do this and like be motivated to do it. Motivation is actually sort of like a post beginning thing. You got to just begin and do stuff, and then like you'll start to figure out like what motivates you.
That is so true and so wise. I think a lot of people try to take tips from other experts in various industries, maybe in the Web3 space, maybe in the Web2 arena, and it's all about how to get motivated, but they're starting from a few steps ahead of themselves because they don't really know what direction they should be pointing themselves in first. Find what you're find what you're passionate about first, and that will motivate you in and of itself. So that is such a gem of wisdom. Appreciate you sharing that with our audience, Ivan. Thank you.
There's two books that I would highly recommend to anybody that's ever struggling with any sort of like writer's block or figuring out some direction. Is Seth Godin wrote a book called The Practice, and there's also a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And those books like directly tackle the whole struggle of like, how do I get going? Like, and it's more about like get going, and then the rest will figure itself out. Like you'll get the motivation when you need it, but it's not something that you can just kind of like, it's not going to just fall on your lap.
I love The War of Art. I haven't read the other one. I will add that to the top of my list. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there were any books or anything that you would recommend. I love those. I actually, my good friend had just recommended. There's a new one that Stephen Pressfield just came out with that he asked if I had read it. I forget which one it is, but I said no. So it's en route, and I need to read The War of Art. But like I think that's the interesting thing, right? And again, if we look at each one of our journeys, they're unique, and but doing. I actually posted about it the other day, like doing things that you love, right? And just doing it, you find your way into it. And again, I'll share it anecdotally, like I've been in this space for about 6 months. I quit my job, and I'm slowly figuring out what all of this looks like for me from a coaching, from a Web3, from all that perspective. But like what I do and what I love is connecting with individuals, helping them understand their journeys and spread positivity throughout the world, right? Like, and that continues to show up how I show up daily. And here I am hosting a podcast with a dear friend and getting to share Ivan's story and all of this stuff. But like, it's the it's the epitome of what you just said, right? Find out what you love to do, start charging forward, and then you kind of start building the ship or building the plane as it goes. And it's kind of what we're doing with the podcast too. We're figuring it out as we go. We're figuring out how this works. But like, I think that's the fun thing about life. And I want to ask, and again, because you had all of these tremendous accolades once you got clear and you're moving in this direction. But like, what I want to know, like, how, like, where's the genesis of Mindfolk? Because again, you mentioned the crew, you mentioned everybody that kind of has played these pieces, and you guys have been friends. But like, can you talk to us about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, for sure. So Mindfolk, I started getting into Web3. I'd heard about Web3 in 2017. Again, Sigmundo, like he's a key player in this whole thing. We'd always stay in touch, and I always admired him because I don't think he's ever lived in a single country for longer than a year since he left school. So he's basically spent he's lived in I don't know, I don't want to say how old he is, but he's lived in a lot of countries all over the world. Like from Vegas to Colombia to Thailand and he just always moves around. At the moment, he's living in Bali. And I always admired that. He just kind of found his own, he just became this independent, free agent and, figured out how to make money on the internet, which was a crazy idea for me when he first told me. I was like, make money on the internet? Like, that's not real money, And so he basically contacted me in 2017 and he was like, hey, you're killing it with this e-commerce. Like, I've got this business. We're busy raising money for this NFT. And he explained the whole concept, and I was like, oh, this is super cool. And then there was a moment where I was potentially going to work as a marketing manager for his business that he was doing in Web3. But then the 2017 crash came and everything basically just dissolved and went to dust because of the markets. And so NFTs disappeared. But we still kept in touch. And then it was 2020 when we started talking again, and we were towards the end of 2020, he had told me about the Solana. And he was like, I know about the Solana, and he'd watched Solana launch. And then by January, Solana was like $12, which was a very early starting point, even though we've seen lower than that now, which is insane. But at that time, it was super early. It was like 2021, beginning of the year. Radium, we watched Radium launch their protocol, which was the first real big DeFi protocol on Solana. And we started messing around on farms and pools, and we kind of I started learning about Web3 more from a token perspective, or more from the DeFi side. And we just kept working together, and then we actually got together, the Mindfolk team, except for Jurgens, the artist of Mindfolk, because we didn't really need an artist at that time. And we submitted a proposal for the first ever Solana hackathon, which was actually like a remittance application for moving funds between countries in Africa, because it's very difficult. Like the currencies there and the political instability and economic issues make it very hard for people that are working in South Africa to send money back to their families in other parts of Africa. And so obviously Solana makes a lot of sense for something like that. So we submitted for that, and I think we did pretty well. We came like top 5 in the African like section of it. And yeah, that was our start into Web3. And then Mindfolk was, we'd heard about the Metaplex standard being released. So we'd heard from, it was actually Sigmundo's brother who told us, and he was like, listen, they're making an NFT standard. We need to start thinking about this. And it just felt like from when we first heard about it, it was like DJ Ape, Stuckbirds, and we were like in the thick of it, still figuring out how we were going to get involved because it just moved so fast. And we knew immediately, we were like, Jurgens is our guy. You know, he's a high school friend. His art is so unique. He's working out of like a farmer's market on a weekend, selling his art, you know, at this like little shop. And we knew that he was the guy we were going to use. And so, yeah, that's basically from the beginning to how Mindfolk started. And by the end of 2021 was when we launched Mindfolk.
So you knew Jurgens also from your high school days?
Yeah,
Wow.
I've got photos of me and Jurgens at hotbox parties, the ones I just told you about, like me and him like getting wasted and like on a rooftop, like wearing beads and crazy jewelry and like basically kissing each other. Yeah, I've known Jurgens since I was in high school as well.
So is he also heavily into the alternative and maybe indie music scene? I've never gotten to speak with him directly. I've always wanted to because his art, the reason why I was drawn to it probably a year ago when I first discovered it, it reminds me so much of one of my favorite bands and their art um, themes. Not directly, not like it's copying the art, but just like the thematic references. Do you know the band The Decemberists?
I think I've heard of them, but I don't know them very well. No.
Think it's all the ship references and like the line work. It's very kind of folksy and like you're telling a like an old tale with the art from Jurgens, and it just reminds me. It's why I was immediately drawn to it and very fond of it. It just I love it so much. So I didn't know what music he might be a fan of, but I just love his art style. So yeah, but that's so cool that he's also someone else you've known for a million years.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically the composition of the whole team. Our lead developer is brothers with our designer, who's best friends with Jurgens, who went to school in Pretoria in the same, like, and was friends with myself and Sigmundo. So yeah, we've known each other, which is also like a big reason why we're still doing this. You know, like Mindfolk has been through some crazy shit. We've been at the highest level in terms of market cap, highest floor price, almost on Solana at one given time. We've also been in probably the most fudded project on Solana, and you know, it's just like learning about that, the ups and downs, like what I was talking kind of about with meditation. Another big lesson that I learned was equanimity, because like life is always changing, like things are impermanent. Like it's if you hold on to something, it's going to run away from you, and if you push something away, it's going to attach itself to you. So just be with whatever it is, you know. And if things are tough, then that's what it is. Accept it for what it is, and keep moving, keep like, you know, the practice going, and keep like sharpening your axe and chopping it up. So yeah, I think those are like important lessons and values that we hold with Mindfolk. You know, is that the team, just myself, I'm like a relentless person, but the team has been relentless. You know, we always motivating each other, and we always talking to each other about like cool ideas and trying to like you know, advance and be as innovative as possible with Mindfolk. And yeah, we're really looking forward to these next phases with the Renaissance, because I feel that's going to be an opportunity for us to like really begin again, you know, basically start from the beginning and really breathe all of our experience into this next stage.
I love the idea that you all have coined it a renaissance rather than a next collection or a new mint, or you you've really galvanized the community to be excited about um, kind of a rebirth and a reimagination of everything you've done before, and combining that with new concepts and new flavors, a new, I mean, it can be anything from a reimagined color palette to new designs, but still celebrating um, tr- traditions of art that you guys have done for the past 2 years. So I love that you called it a renaissance. Um, what are you most excited about as being, basically the team leader, the face of the team, the one who leads the charge um, in leading up to what will be this new mint? What has been essentially the most exciting part for you, and what has been the most challenging leading up to this, the most challenging element?
Yeah, so I mean, being in like a leadership style position, um, I think that's also something amongst friends can be something that takes time. Like I feel like we all kind of hold an equal weight because we all occupy like a certain space within the project or a certain skill set. You know, it's so cool that our team is all friends, but we all like, you know, it's like artist, like developer, marketer, background in crypto, and you know, so we and designer or like UI UX, so it all just kind of comes together. I would say the most challenging part has been learning how to manage a community in a way that is productive, you know, to like build on top of that, and then also to tell our story in the best way possible. You know, I feel like that, I mean, from a marketing background, you know, as much as I have whatever accolades I have, when I got into the Web3 space, like I was like, I am the biggest noob ever. Like I don't know shit about marketing. You know, like I get on spaces and like hear other people or look at other projects and be like, wow, like these dudes are killing it, you know. And it's been such an amazing learning curve for me, and I still feel like I am such an amateur. But in the beginning that was really challenging, but like for me now, because I mean, what I did in my master's even is not really something that like has transitioned really well into Web3, because Web3 is like its own monster. It's just its own animal, and I feel like, but that's also what excites me, is that I want to continue to keep learning and just keep like getting better at my own skill set within Web3. And I feel like I'm only now, after like 2 years, starting to kind of like feel and like find my feet, you know. And I feel like now is like setting the foundation for really being able to like tackle certain problems within the space, or looking at certain solutions that blockchain might offer, and to actually be able to like advance that, to like revolutionize certain aspects of NFT projects. You know, like on-chain governance is a big one that we're looking into, like really looking at like the political and economical side of how those things work, and you know, how a decentralized autonomous organization, what it actually is like, and how it could work in practice. And you know, there aren't many people who have been able to do that successfully, but I feel motivated to work within that space, because at some point in time we're going to figure that out, you know, or at least we're going to keep getting better at it, and it's going to, and I want to be part of that charge, you know, within this space, within Web3. So yeah, challenging part is maybe like feeling like I really don't know shit. That was challenging. But then exciting parts is like having moments of breakthrough, you know, like with Mindfolk, like we set the standards, or the specific procedures that led to Mindfolk to, you know, having the success that it had. But we were also the people that created the parts that didn't work at all, you know. But I feel like even though those were difficult times because other people were dictating our narrative back to us, I still feel like it was an amazing time for Mindfolk, because we learned so much. Like we learned so much about how to do things really badly, you know, like, and how to do the wrong things and how to recover from that, and how to rebuild, and how to like understand the psychology of people in this space, and and I feel, yeah, but I can't think of a single moment, but there's been a lot of like really awesome moments where the team comes together, because we have like a few hours of meetings every day where we just sit and talk through ideas, and then we spend most of our private time working on our stuff. And there's just like those moments where we really like things click, and then you start to like make progress in a certain way, and like you get excited about something. And yeah, those are great moments for sure.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is super exciting. And again, I've been in the space for just over a year. And again, I've known of Mindfolk, and obviously with the Renaissance coming to life, right? And are working together with that. Like, I'm continue to learn more. And I think that the one thing that I heard from you was one of the big challenges was how the narrative wasn't being controlled by the community within Mindfolk, but it was being controlled by the people outside. And my reflection on that is that one, it was good that people were talking about you, good or bad, right? You're still being talked about, because again, so many people don't get talked. Like when you're not being talked about, right, you're completely and totally irrelevant. You fall off the face. But like the other thing is, it's a reflection of how did you guys sit and understand what was being said and how it didn't align, and then how are you guys shifting the plan forward to make sure that your messaging and your mission and your values are being spread the way you want them?
Yeah, so I would say that's probably one of the most difficult parts of this whole thing, is that we had to first understand how people perceived Mindfolk, and how they thought about the brand and how they communicated about our brand, and then we had to think about how we could change that. And I think changing the way people perceive a specific brand or a specific idea is way more difficult than just starting new. It's difficult to get people to gather around something that's had this negative connotation, and when you have like a mass group of people that all feel a certain way, and specifically negatively about something, it's really hard to change their minds about that. I mean, that was something that we really struggled with, or that we're still struggling with. And for us, other than the idea of the Renaissance, which is the specific things that we're focusing on within Mindfolk, it was things like this, like exactly what we're doing right now. Like it was about, we realized that we needed to win back the Solana community. We had to be able to like build trust and allow people to see us as people and be like, cool, this Mindfolk team has been around for over a year. They've been through insane shit. They've got a ton of experience. They are founders 2.0. Ready to bring their experience into this new space, and be fully aware and transparent about everything that we've experienced through the journey of Mindfolk. So that's something that's part of this whole campaign, is we're sharing this content series where we're basically transparently sharing like everything we've been through, like all the ups and downs, like tackling all the difficult conversations, all the difficult questions, and giving people the story of Mindfolk in the best way that we can. And that's basically our attempt at being able to reconnect with the Solana community and be like, guys, like we're not going anywhere, and like we are here to make an impact in the future. And the Renaissance is the rebirth and the beginning of our starting again.
I really like that. And I like that you're making such a concerted effort, you and the rest of the team, on the account, with so many different tiered levels of approaches to this. So you've got a Substack where you kind of turn the concept on its head, how five Africans made the strongest NFT Ponzi on Solana, where you give it a clickbait title, but then you're really opening up about, the team, your experiences, everything being as transparent as possible. You get everyone in there reading it, retweeting it to almost like 700 within 20 hours, less than 24 hours. You've got spaces stacked up day in and day out, throughout every day. Everybody wants to know what is really the story behind, what you've done for the past 2 years, year and a half. So I I think the method is working. You guys have really come full force attack with this, and I just want to commend you, and all of you, on your approach with just full transparency. And I hope, I know not all of your team is front facing, but I think having more of your team get out there and speak and do interviews like this, even if they're not like full podcasts, but just getting out there and getting to talk to people in spaces, um, I think would be even more revelatory. I think everybody would enjoy that. So I know Coach and I are getting extreme amounts of pride and pleasure getting to talk to you one on one like this, Ivan. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. This has been a great conversation.
And we know that you have, as Gogo mentioned, we know that you've got a ton of spaces and you've got stuff lined up. So obviously, keeping to your schedule, I know we may have run a minute or two over, so we appreciate that. I want to make sure that our listeners, because we're dropping this before the mint, can figure out when the mint is, where to find the information, and then furthermore, where they can learn more about you, Mindfolk, and the team. And we'll link all of this in the show notes, but I wanted to hear from you where we can send our listeners.
Cool. So yeah, I would say the best place to start would be to get on our Discord and follow us on Twitter. That's all the information about the Renaissance is in our Discord. So we've made it pretty clear exactly how you can get whitelisted. So we have an application process that's kind of acting as it's called Mindfolk Connect, and it's all about getting people to go through the process of becoming part of the actual journey within Mindfolk. So if you apply on Connect and you jump into our Discord, you'll actually have a profile there where you can engage with our tweets and engage with our content and be rewarded for that as well, because we want people to actually become part of the narrative, kind of reversing what happened in the past. And so, yeah, best place to be would be to jump on Discord and to get on Twitter. And yeah, so you can apply on Connect. It's connect.mindfolk.art. That would be where I would say they should go first, then get into Discord, then follow us on Twitter. And we've got a bunch of animations and we got the content series on Substack as well. It's a nice way to get to know more about the behind the scenes story. And you can also follow me, Ivan Hyphen, on Twitter. And the mint information is 31st of January on Magic Eden.
And I should say, as of maybe just a day and a half ago, I want to let our audience know Mindfolk has had over 40,000 applications, and at least 450 approved. So there's probably new information as of today, but that's how popular this is, and that's how amazing their software is. They didn't go with anybody else's application software, Mindful. I believe, Ivan, am I correct? You guys built this one out yourself?
Yeah, we built it from scratch. We actually only started about 2.5 weeks ago. But yeah, I think as of now, I think we're at about 44,000 applications and about 700 accepted.
Dang.
Wow. Wow. Congratulations to your team. So,
Thank you.
so adept, that you were able to do this, and pull that off in such a short amount of time, and it's so successful, so smooth. So many people are taking advantage of it. That's amazing. I'm very happy for your team.
Thanks, Gogo. I appreciate it.
Well, we've dropped all the information. We've learned about Ivan and his journey in life. And again, I'll express a moment of gratitude on behalf of myself and Gogo. Like, Ivan, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for being authentic and showing your true colors with the world, right? And we know as well as anybody that it's not easy to do. So, and we're honored that you chose to do that through us, and allow us to be a little bit of a megaphone and microphone for it. We will link all of the mint details and everything in the show notes. And for anybody doesn't know what the hell Ivan was just talking about or Gogo was talking about with Web3, let us know, right? Because again, we're also trying to reach people that don't understand this. So ask us the questions, reach out. We will do our best to help. Gogo, anything else to close with?
I just want to thank you, Ivan, again for being our very first filmed podcast guest. We are so honored to have you. It was an incredible conversation. I know some parts of it, as you mentioned, seemed a little bit like therapy, but I think that's great, honestly, because we were all three of us able to relate to each other on so many levels. And I just really appreciate your time. Um, Coach, thank you for being an excellent host alongside. And I hope everyone here has a wonderful day.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you guys taking the time. This has been really awesome. I'd love to do it again sometime. Maybe post Mint can have another review.
Oh,
Absolutely. We would
love
love
it.
that.
Love it. Love it. So thank you for following along. Thank you for being here, Ivan. We know we've got to get going. So um, as everybody, we're grateful to be here. This is the roadmap, and thanks for joining us on the journey. Talk to y'all soon.
Chop, chop.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Roadmap. We're honored to host such fantastic guests every week and help share their stories with a wide audience.
We hope you enjoyed tuning in. And if you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channels. You can find us at The Roadmap Show on YouTube and Twitter, and The Roadmap.show on Instagram.
We'll join you again next week for another amazing conversation.
I'm Coach. She's GoGo. Thanks for being a part of our roadmap.